So think about a mystery that literally every single human being on Earth shares. Today, we're going to explore the absolute black hole of our first 3 years of life. Think about it. You lived an entire, rich, vibrant life before the age of 3. You were born, you opened your eyes for the first time, you heard your mother's voice, you tasted real food, and you took your very first steps. Yet, if you try to look back at that time, there's nothing, right? Just darkness. Why is that? Well, get ready, because the true answer is going to completely change how you view your own mind. I want you to take a second and actually search your mind right now for your absolute earliest memory. You got it? Okay. How old are you in it? Maybe 3? Maybe 4? Notice how anything before that is just gone. Poof. You learned how to walk, you learned how to say your first words, you experienced this incredible spectrum of new emotions. But despite all of those massive milestones, you remember absolutely none of it. Not a single moment. Okay, let's dive into this by defining the actual scientific phenomenon we're talking about here. It was Sigmund Freud who first put a name to this back in 1905, coining the term infantile amnesia. Now, the biggest myth surrounding infantile amnesia is that baby brains simply couldn't record anything, that they were, too weak or underdeveloped to hold on to a memory. But science has decisively proven that babies can, in fact, form memories. We know this for a fact, and we have the experiments to prove it. To prove this, let's look at this incredibly elegant experiment run in the 1980s by psychologist Carolyn Rovi Collier at Rutgers University. The setup was simple, but honestly, genius. She tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above their crib. Naturally, the babies quickly learned that when they kicked their leg, the mobile moved, and they absolutely loved it. But here's the critical part. When she brought those exact same babies back days or even weeks later and put them back in the crib, they remembered. They started kicking immediately. Even 2-month-olds held that memory for days, and 6-month-olds remembered for weeks. So infant brains absolutely can learn, store, and recall information. Now, this forces us into a massive paradigm shift. Your baby brain wasn't failing to record your life. It was recording everything. Those memories were actually there, fully formed and stored in your developing mind. But by the time you reached adulthood, every trace of them just vanished. This means we aren't looking at a camera that forgot to hit the record button. No, we're looking at a metaphorical crime scene where the tapes were actively erased. Something came in and destroyed those memories. And to figure out the culprit, we have to look inside the brain itself. Section 1. The hardware, anatomy, and destructive growth. Let's look at the physical brain to see what happened to those missing years. So, the first part of the answer is deeply structural. Deep inside your brain is this small, curved structure called the hippocampus, and this acts as the engine of memory formation. It basically takes a lived experience, like a walk in the rain or a birthday party, and encodes it into an episode you can replay later. Now, in a healthy adult, the hippocampus works hand in hand with the prefrontal cortex to tag, store, and retrieve these episodes. But in infants, this system is severely underdeveloped. The vital connections between the hippocampus and the cortex are basically still under construction. More specifically, key regions like the dentate gyrus, which is essentially the gateway for new memories, aren't fully wired up until somewhere between ages 2 and 4. So, while your infant brain could form short-term memories, the physical bridge to move them into permanent long-term storage just wasn't fully built yet. But structural immaturity is only half the biological story here. What comes next is genuinely mind-bending. In 2014, 2 neuroscientists in Toronto, Sheena Jocelyn and Paul Franklin at the Hospital for Sick Children, made a discovery that completely flipped infant memory research on its head. They looked at a process called neurogenesis. In the first few years of your life, your hippocampus is producing new neurons at a downright extraordinary rate. I mean, this process is absolutely essential. These brand new brain cells are what wire up the circuits you're going to rely on for the rest of your life. But Jocelyn and Franklin hypothesized that this massive production of new neurons came with a devastating cost. So the crucial point is revealed in this fascinating, highly counterintuitive experiment they ran on mice, which was later published in the journal Science. When the researchers artificially increased neurogenesis in adult mice, a sudden surge of new brain cells caused those adult mice to start forgetting things they had already learned. Conversely, when they slowed down neurogenesis in infant mice, those infants held onto their memories much longer than normal. It turns out, every time a new neuron integrates into an existing circuit, it physically disrupts the connections that were already there, the very connections holding your earliest memories. Just let that settle in for a moment. Your brain kept building new rooms and tearing down the old walls in the process. I love this quote because it perfectly summarizes the sheer biological cost of brain growth.
The exact same explosion of new neurons that built your incredible, highly capable adult brain fundamentally overwrote the memory stored inside it. Your earliest experiences weren't lost because they were never saved. They were lost because memory destruction was simply the necessary byproduct of your brain's relentless development. It was literally building new rooms and tearing down the old walls in the process.
Section 2. The software, sense of self, and language. So we've looked at the biological hardware tearing down the walls, but now let's peel back the layers and look at the mental software that was missing. To form what scientists call an autobiographical memory, which is the kind of memory where you are the main character, replaying an event in your own mind, you need something we all take completely for granted today. You need a sense of self. You have to understand that you exist as a distinct, separate person from the world around you, and that things are happening to you. In the late 1990s, developmental psychologists Mark Howe and Mary Courage argued that this is a critical missing piece of the puzzle. Think about it. Without a narrator inside your head to package experiences into a cohesive story, there's basically no you to attach the memory to. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly when that narrator actually shows up. It's called the classic Rouge mirror test. If you put a little dot of rouge makeup on a baby's nose and put them in front of a mirror before they're 18 months old, they treat the reflection like it's a completely different child. They don't reach for their own face at all. But magically, right around 18 months, everything changes. They look in the mirror, see the dot, and immediately reach for their own nose. They finally recognize that the person in the mirror is them. And this exact timeline, the birth of self-recognition, tracks perfectly with the earliest age that autobiographical memories are even capable of forming. Think about this deeply for a second. If you had no continuous sense of self, and the physical brain that held your earliest experiences actively rewired itself beyond recognition by tearing down its own circuits, is the baby in your old family photos actually you? Or is it someone else entirely? Someone who just happened to live in the same body, but whose mind was literally disassembled and rebuilt, neuron by neuron, into the person listening to this explainer right now. It is a profoundly uncomfortable yet utterly fascinating question about our own identities. There is one final piece of this software puzzle, and that is language. Developmental psychologist Catherine Nilsson spent years studying how children form lasting memories. And her groundbreaking conclusion was that language doesn't just describe the memories we have, it actually provides the vital structure needed for them to survive at all. Before you could speak, your experiences were just raw sensory impressions, sounds, textures, flashes of light, bursts of emotion. But without words to organize those impressions, they had no framework. Language gives memory a skeleton. Without it, your early experiences were just water with no container. They existed beautifully in the moment, and then they slipped away. And we know for sure this isn't just a theory, because we can see it play out across the globe. Data collected by psychologist Qi Wang at Cornell University shows that the average age of a person's earliest memory actually changes depending on the culture they were raised in. In Western cultures, where parents frequently narrate their kids' experiences and build personal narratives, the first memory hits around age 3.5. But look at the Maori of New Zealand. Their rich oral tradition places extraordinary emphasis on personal history and early storytelling, pushing their average first memory all the way back to 2.5 years old. Meanwhile, in some East Asian cultures that focus a bit less on early individual narratives, it sits closer to age 4. The culture you grow up in physically alters the timeline of your memory retention by providing that linguistic skeleton earlier or later. So, bringing it all together, the erasure of your early years wasn't due to one single failure of the brain. It was a perfect storm happening all at once. You had an underdeveloped hippocampus acting as an incomplete bridge. You had rampant neurogenesis physically overwriting the memory circuits as fast as they were built. You were missing a sense of self to mentally anchor the experiences to a main character. And you lacked the language to give those raw sensory impressions a structure that could survive the test of time. It wasn't one thing, it was literally everything. Every single human being who has ever lived went through this exact same process. You have a black hole where the first years of your life should be. But hopefully you now realize that the answer isn't that your brain was too weak or too simple. Actually, your brain was doing something vastly more important than simply remembering what you had for breakfast as a toddler. It was doing the heavy lifting of becoming you. And that monumental task required the beautiful, necessary destruction of the mind that came before it. Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to ponder. If becoming who you are today required completely destroying the memories and the mental framework of the person you were back then, what is your brain quietly rewriting right now? As you continue to grow and experience the world, how much of your current self is being overwritten to build the person you will become tomorrow? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this sparks some deep curiosity about the incredible machine inside your head.